Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name is Keith and I'm sure glad you stopped by today. In today's video, I invite you to come along with me as we celebrate my son's 6th birthday. Yeah, my middle son Judah just turned 6 today. It's amazing how time flies. I remember when we brought that little guy home from the hospital. Now he's 6 years old. So for his birthday, I'm gonna cook up some hot dogs and we have some deer burgers. So I'm not really doing any heavy cuts of meat. So after I get this meat on the grill, I want to come back, sit down and talk to you about what steps we can take when we're grilling meat, when we're prepping meat, and even after we pull it off the grill to ensure our meat is both tender and moist. So let me get this meat on the grill, and if that sounds good to you, let's dive in. So the idea for this video actually came in response to a comment that I saw in one of my last videos I put out, and it was how I go about cooking spare ribs direct on my charcoal grill and the techniques that I use. And when I cook those ribs, I didn't cook them in your traditional way. When people traditionally cook ribs, they say, hey, in order to get them tender, you gotta go low and slow. I didn't cook them low and slow, y'all. I went hot and fast. 2-hour total cook time. My temperature was upwards about 375, so I wasn't low and slow, but I was still able to achieve tenderness. So it makes me ask the question then, what is the definition of tender, and what steps can we take before we start grilling, while we start grilling, and then after we pull our meat off the grill to ensure that our meat is tender, juicy, and moist. Now, let me go ahead and flip this meat, and when I come back, let's get into it. So now first I just want to define what it means for a piece of meat to be tender. What's really going on? So in order for a piece of meat to be tender, it means that you, when you've prepared, you've grilled your meat, you have sufficiently broken down the fibers in that meat so that whoever you serve it to, whenever they chew it, they don't have to labor to eat it, right? We're trying to serve up a nice, tender, moist piece of meat. We're not making jerky. You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting because depending on your taste and your palate, the level of tenderness that you want might be different. For example, when I grilled my ribs in that video, I don't like my ribs to fall off the bone tender. You know, the same tenderness you would have if you cooked in a crock pot. I don't like my ribs to be that. The tenderness that I'm going for in the rib, I want a bite in it and I want some tug. I want to be able to tug it off the bone. I don't want it to fall off the bone. Now, I know when I have achieved my level of tenderness in the rib is that when I tug it off the bone, you don't see any meat left, y'all, on the bone. I'm able to tug it off and you don't see any meat tracks left on the bone. That's when I know I nailed it. So that's what I was able to achieve in that last grilling session when I grilled those ribs. And there are 3 things that I keep in mind. First of all, in order to achieve tenderness, you have to be mindful of the temperature of your grill. You have to be mindful of how much time you're grilling your meat for. And the third thing that gets overlooked sometimes is moisture, right? So think about it. Temperature, time, and moisture. So when I cook those ribs, I cooked them hot and I cooked them fast. So at this point, On the tenderness scale, it's like, bro, you kind of out of balance. However, what did I do at the end to get them tender? I wrapped them in that foil, y'all. So I was able to counteract the fact I cooked them hot and fast by wrapping them in that foil. Now I'm bringing the tenderness kind of formula back into balance. And that foil, what did it do? It allowed those ribs to cook in their own juices. I added some soy sauce, so I added some additional moisture. I brought that moisture content back up, and that's how I was able to achieve a tender rib on that day. So again, keys to tender meat when you're grilling: time on the grill, temperature, and moisture. Now, there are opportunities for you to address each one of those, not just when you're grilling, but before you even put your meat on the grill. And after we take care of this meat, that's what I want to break down next. We're going to break down the whole grilling process and making sure that we are taking advantage of opportunities to get our meat tender throughout the whole process. Hold on, y'all. I'll be right back. So first step, I think, when we think about tender meat, tender cuts of meat, we have to talk about meat selection. Wherever you're getting your meat from, you want to make sure you get a quality cut of meat, whatever you're doing. For example, if I'm grilling up some steaks, man, I love a ribeye. My wife and I, we love our ribeye steaks. And when I select a ribeye steak, I don't want a steak that's too lean. I want something that has some nice marbling to it. I want something that has some fat tracks in there. Because the leaner the meat is, the more difficult it's going to be to get it tender, right? When you have a lean cut of meat that doesn't have a lot of fat in there, this is when you got to beat it with a mallet and you got to go through all this stuff. You may have to use some enzymes to tenderize it. You got to take some additional steps. But when you get a nice ribeye with that marbling, you make the tenderizing process a bit more easy for yourself. And then ribs, you got to think through that. How much fat do you want in your ribs? Like a chicken breast. A chicken breast is real lean. So you got to take some additional steps, right? If you want to keep that tender. And the leaner the meat is, the easier it is for it to dry out, right? So meat selection plays an important role. And that's going to be step number one to ensuring our meat is tender, to make sure you get that nice balance of leanness and also fat content. I think I mentioned to y'all earlier that in addition to hot dogs, today we're grilling up some deer burgers. Now, as I grill up these burgers, I have to be mindful that deer in and of itself is a lean piece of meat. And when you're grilling these deer burgers, if you grill them for too long, right? If you grill them too long time and you grill them at a temperature that's too high, you can dry these burgers out, right? Because of that lean cut of meat. And now, when you get them processed, they'll add some fat to it, but that in and of itself, man, you still gotta be mindful of not overcooking deer because it is a lean cut of meat. So that's one of the examples of just the content and the meat selection, and you got to keep that in mind as well.
Birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Judah. Happy birthday to you. Yay!
So we've already selected our meat. We got it back home. We've already gone through the process of washing and rinsing our meat. And now we're ready to season and do whatever else we do. One thing that I do that I've not done ever since I started grilling, I started doing this several years ago, but there was a time where I didn't use olive oil and I didn't coat my meat with olive oil, and I started to experiment with olive oil, and I found that when I use olive oil, my meat would come out more tender and moist. I would cook it the exact same way. All I added was olive oil. And it's interesting, as I did a bit of research, I saw that olive oil does in fact protect your meat from intense temperatures. So when I'm cooking steaks, or like the last video, when I cook those ribs and I'm subjecting it to those hot temperatures, that olive oil is protecting my meat from drying out, and it's protecting that moisture from escaping from that meat, and it's providing me that level of protection. So because I'm protecting the moisture, I have then helped this meat maintain its tenderness. So that's one thing I do in the prep, is add olive oil to try to help that meat stay tender, and so that additional moisture won't escape from that meat. The second thing that I do, man, I learned this back in high school. Back when I was playing ball, we had a guy, Mr. Embry. Mr. Embry, I was good friends with his son. And Mr. Embry, I remember talking to him one day, because I was like, Mr. Embry, you got to put me on. Because he would serve up, he would prepare some ribs for our like team luncheons and stuff, and his ribs were just amazing. So one day I went over to his house. I said, Mr. Embry, sir, you're going to have to break this process to me now, because I got to know, what are you doing with these ribs? And he was just, kicking some game to me and let me know what the process was with the ribs. And what he said is that, Keith, it starts with the prep. He said, when you season your meat, don't just sprinkle it on there. Take the time to rub and massage your seasonings into the meat. I was like, for what? He said, think about it. When you massage and rub those seasonings into the meat, you're rubbing them into the fibers, and you are breaking down those fibers. And remember how we define tenderness? That's your ability, right, when you're preparing and cooking this meat, to break down those fibers. So in the seasoning process, take that additional time to really massage that meat and rub it into those fibers to start breaking them down. So that's why ideally, if you have time, it's good to maybe season your meat the night before, put it in the fridge, and then sit it out before you start grilling to give that seasoning more time to break down those fibers. Or what I do, I'll come out here and start my charcoal up, and while my charcoal is starting, I'll take my meat out the fridge, season it, rub it in my seasonings, and I'll let them sit out. So the second thing you do when you prep, I don't like going straight from the fridge to the grill. I want those fibers to have time to transition temperatures. I don't want to just go from a cold fridge to a hot grill and just shock them, right? I want them to gradually come up to temperature, because I don't want to shock them and them not be able to tenderize. They're then tough or more difficult to tenderize. So that's why I like to leave them on the counter for a little bit, maybe not quite room temperature, but almost thereabout. And then once my coals get ready, I put them on the grill, and we have gradually then brought them up to temperature. So when they hit that grill, they're about room temperature, and then we're ready to go up from there. So in your meat prep process, a couple things to consider. If you haven't used olive oil, man, you may want to experiment with olive oil. Number two, take the time to really rub your seasonings in to tenderize your meat. And three, let your meat come up to temperature a little bit before you put it on the grill. So now we've got the meat on the grill, right? We're getting into this grilling session. When it comes to temperature and time, I think you've got a little flexibility on the grill. You can choose to go a low and slow approach, or like I showed in that rib video, you can go hot and fast. There's some flex there. But when it comes to moisture, there's a tighter tolerance there. You got to be careful, because if you just neglect moisture and don't do anything, that meat is going to dry out on you, and then as it gets dry, it's going to get tough, and then you're going to get a jerky, right? you're not gonna get moist, tender meat, man. You're gonna be more on that jerky side, and that's not what we're trying to do. So take the necessary steps while it's on the grill to introduce moisture. I've done a number of things before as I cook. There's times where I'll set up my grill, I'll set up 2 zones. I'll set up zone number 1 to have the coals, and zone number 2 will be just my ashtray. And on top of my ashtray, I'll take an aluminum tray and I'll fill it with water. And the purpose of that water is to keep that moisture level up in the grill so my meat doesn't dry out. So that's one thing you can do. Add a little aluminum tray to your grill in zone number 2. Second thing you can do is spritzing your meat. This is what some people do. They'll get like get a bottle, and I've done this before. You can put apple cider vinegar in there. You can put water. Some people you may use soda, apple juice. It's your opportunity to be creative. But as you're spritzing your meat, you're adding moisture to it. And as you add moisture based on what you have in there, you can add flavor as well. So whether you go aluminum foil, tray with water, or spritzing your meat, those are things you can do to add moisture as you're grilling. And the third thing, this is what I did in the rib video, and I've done this in a number of my videos. It's called the Texas Crunch, the Texas Cheat, whatever you want to call it. It's just wrapping your meat with foil during the latter stages of that cook in order for it to cook in its own juices, and you're essentially steaming it. So you are reintroducing moisture back into this meat, and you're getting it to absorb that moisture. And that in and of itself is going to help tenderize your meat. So those are 3 things that you can do while you're grilling in order to get that meat to maintain the moisture that it has in it, or reintroduce moisture into the meat so that it can stay moist during your cook. Another thing I like to do as well is that I oftentimes will cook meat past the internal doneness temperature, right? So if you look up what's the temperature for chicken, or what's the temperature for pork, or this, that, and the other, and I'll be like 145, 165. That may be the temperature that it's safe to eat. But that might not be the temperature at which it is tender and good to eat, if you know what I'm saying. So I would suggest experiment with cooking past the doneness temperature, right? If your chicken or meat is hitting at that target doneness temperature, then at that point you want to wrap it in foil and let it go a little bit longer. But once you get past that doneness temperature, you're going to have to dial back a little bit. You're going to have to dial back on your temperature. You may have to reintroduce some more moisture. So you got to play with it a little bit, because as you get past that doneness temperature, if you're not careful, you can dry your meat out. So that's where you got to balance out that, that tender equation of time, temperature, and moisture. All right, I'm cooking this for an extended period of time. I'm at high temperatures. I need to increase the moisture table. So those are things to play with, because somebody had some comments about, hey, their meat was done, it hit the doneness temperature, but it didn't taste good. It wasn't what they needed it to be. So at that point, I would cook it past the doneness temperature, but I would wrap it in foil. I may take it off the direct heat, go indirect. So there's some things that you can do. So definitely experiment with cooking past the doneness temperature, but take those necessary steps to ensure that meat stays tender and moist.
Ready, set, hi!
All right, y'all, we made it to our last phase. Remember, we talked about meat selection. We talked about meat prep. We talked about grilling. The last phase now is post-grilling, or what steps can you take after you pull your meat off the grill in order to ensure it's tender and moist. What I like to do prior to cutting my meat open is to let it sit for at least 10 minutes. When you let that meat sit for at least 10 minutes, you're letting those juices redistribute. Because when you're cooking, I found that with those intense temperatures too, when I cook direct, that moisture is being driven towards the center of that meat, right? And when I let it rest, I want that moisture to redistribute itself throughout the meat. So I don't just have pockets of tenderness, I have a tender cut of meat throughout. So not only does it help with the moisture, it helps with the flavor. So definitely take that additional step now. Sometimes I'm a little impatient. I don't want to wait 10 minutes. But I'm telling you, if you can wait 10 minutes before you open it up and cut it up, that'll definitely help you get a tender and juicy cut of meat. All right, y'all, thank you so much for hanging out with me today as we celebrated Judah's birthday, and we talked about my keys for ensuring that your meat is tender, juicy, and moist when you're grilling. Y'all give it a try and let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope this video helped you out. If it did, hit that subscribe button and click that bell so anytime we drop a new video, you'll be the first to know. Hit that like button and leave me some comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in any of the products we used in today's video, we'll leave some links down below. Hope you have an awesome day, and thanks for watching.